Good afternoon, everybody. Excuse me, good morning, everybody. So glad that you're all here today. My name is Mona Raglow. I'm the Director of Membership and Programming at Central Exchange. And I'm very thrilled to welcome you to part 3 of our 4-part series. So many months ago, Katie reached out and said, hey, Mona, I have this idea for some really unique programming at Central Exchange. Well, that has blossomed into a lot of hard work and sweat on her end of putting these topics together, putting the panelists together. And our goal is to help educate our members and the community about what's happening in the trans and non-binary world. So this program is focusing all on family. And before I forget, next month on July 13th is the 4th trans and non-binary program, and it's going to be focusing on sports. But I want to welcome everybody here today. Again, Katie Dixon is such a great advocate for the community. She's a great advocate for Central Exchange, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Katie, to introduce the panelists and get them going.
Perfect. So again, thanks everybody who's here and who's watching on the recording. Per what the process that we've currently had, we're going to keep this really conversational, educational. If you have questions, submit them via chat to Mona, and then we'll open them. She'll either ask them or pass them along to me. And then I just wanted to point out to Hannah said that she has a lot of resources that she usually shares with people. So there will be a post follow-up, an email follow-up after the presentation, and it'll have all of the resources we talk about in it. And if the panelists are willing, their contact information as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass around to each of the panelists for a quick introduction of themselves, and then we'll just kind of get into the conversation. So with that, Kris, do you want to start?
Okay. I'm Kris Bennett, and I'm Nathan Bennett's mom. And I got interested in this topic and was because of Nathan, and really sadly should have been interested way before it hit so close to home, but have just totally we have a Christian family and raised our kids that way. And Nathan has just been incredibly amazing in helping us look at our faith and wrestle with that, and just become way better people, and realizing that within the Christian community that there can be a lot of damage done to especially children. So through that, I've kind of started volunteering at a homeless shelter to be kind of a loving person to a lot of people that find themselves homeless.
Nathan, would you like to introduce yourself next?
And now you're muted, Nathan.
Hello, my name is Nathan. I use they, them pronouns. Yeah, like my mom said, I grew up in a very Christian home, and so grew up in Seattle. Now I live in New York, and just feel honored to have a very supportive family now, and be able to look back and be able to share my own experience of, being in the closet, growing up in a Christian home, and having to look at that and deconstruct that, having a very different life now at 25.
And full disclosure, Nathan is my cousin and Kris is my aunt. So Hannah, would you like to talk next?
My name's Hannah Williams. I'm a case manager at Johnson County Mental Health, working with the kiddos over here. I use she, her pronouns. I identify as gay myself. And so that's kind of, why I'm here. I work with a lot of the queer teens here at Johnson County Mental Health. I run a queer teen group for them, and run some parent support groups and staff trainings here. So I'm pretty invested in, at least here in Johnson County, trying to fill in the gaps for those kiddos.
And Michelle. And you are muted. There we go.
Yep. pretty tech savvy. I'm Michelle Adams, and I am the mom of a trans female. Her name is Noah. Um, we thought she was, of course, our baby boy, so we named her Noah, Noah. And as she began to transition, people would say on her name tag at work, "Oh, like the guy on the boat," and she got kind of tired of that. So just randomly, she dropped the H. And then people started saying, "That's such a beautiful name for a girl. I love that name, Noah." So I think we all know how people can be in general. It's funny how they make judgments just based on a name tag. So Noah was supposed to be with us today, and I feel like she's someone that could really speak to this, but I guess it was 12 days ago that she had gender confirmation surgery at the University of Kansas Medical Center, and she's lying right next to me and teaches me how to on and off the mute button, but is feeling pretty still weak and under the weather. Truth be known, she's a diva and didn't feel like getting fixed up. So that's probably why she's not with us. So that's my story.
Perfect. And so we'll start the conversation. And I think the outcomes that we can kind of look for today are feeling more comfortable in how we can support youth, gaining some empathy and understanding through hearing the experiences. This is kind of a touchy conversation. And so, Nathan obviously shared that they're not a minor anymore, but still young enough to be able to help us kind of understand some of those struggles that are happening right now. And then, so I will just jump right in, and I'll jump right in, I say, as my list of questions is not pulled up in front of my face. Thank you for giving me some grace. I know we kind of touched a little bit on this, but I would just like to start out really broadly. Why is this topic important to you? And why are all of you compelled to be on this call to help explain something really personal to a group of people? And we'll open it up as we go. We usually get a little bit more comfortable in this space, but I'm not going to call on any individual person. Feel free to unmute and share your experiences.
I guess I can start. So I think just growing up as a queer child with not feeling comfortable, sharing my identity with the people around me, you become, very hypersensitive of the environments around you. And so I believe I've had the time to be able to really process and understand, what are necessary resources that an environment should provide queer children and their families, and what families can do in order, kind of like the preventative care, in order to make sure that their children feel comfortable coming out to them at any stage in their life. And so, yeah, I think I am really privileged with being able to have a family who has really followed my lead and have really deconstructed, their own ideas of gender, of their faith. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to be able to share with parents about what they can do to make a better environment, and also for queer kids about, knowing who is safe to talk to, being able to trust like your own survival skills, and just being proud of yourself.
Hannah, Kris.
Yeah. For me, I started working at Johnson County Mental Health now about 5 or so years ago, and kind of noticed a lack in we have psychosocial groups for all ages of kiddos, from young elementary all the way up through high school. And for the high school group, we have high school boys and high school girls. And so for me, I was working with a lot of trans kiddos, gender nonconforming kiddos, just queer kiddos in general. And, they did not feel comfortable in either of those gendered groups. So a couple of years ago, I started the psychosocial groups specifically for queer teens. And it's been a big success, a big hit for those kiddos. There's just something about, finding the community, being in the community, being in a group with teens that have the same lived experiences. I'm gay, so I have some similar lived experiences to some of those kiddos, and just creating a really safe space for those kids Their parents are not always accepting, and some are just trying their best, and it's still, hurtful for the kiddos. So just creating a safe space for the kids. I'm a contact for parents if they have those, for lack of a better term, politically incorrect questions, but they're well intended. I'm not going to get upset or offended by those. So trying to help parents grow and learn. I'm running a parent support group for parents of LGBTQ kids to kind of have that safe space, and just trying to, create a safe space for everybody, for the kids, parents, and seeing how we can grow. I know for me growing up, one of my, I guess, safer people was a camp counselor I went to an all-girls camp for 11 years growing up. And I had a gay camp counselor who, when I was kind of figuring myself out, was so helpful and so affirming. And so just trying to, pass the torch and be that example as well going forward.
And I would say, my heart just breaks when when Nathan, I finally did realize Nathan's truth and all the hiding and self-shame and self-hatred that Nathan described. And so it is my goal to try and help people who are going through that to just feel like they have a safe place with me. And also being in the Christian world, I have friends from very, very conservative to much more liberal. And also just really helping them to understand maybe how our faith can often be incredibly damaging, some of our beliefs to other people. So just having conversations and proximity, I think really, really helps people to change their views often.
And Michelle, would you like to add? But unmute yourself first.
Are we on the first question? Because I lost you for a while.
Yep, we are. We're just saying what compelled you to be here today. If you want to share. If you don't have anything to add, we can go on to the next one.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say I wanted to be here because I've lived through it, and I had a tremendous amount of support and resources, and I've always felt really, really lucky that way, and have promised myself that I will pay it forward. So in any way that I can help anybody else, kind of like what Kris was saying, we had exceptional support from 18 months old on. And so I just want to be able to give that back out.
Yep. And I want to share a quick aside too. As a queer adult, I think you can find what compelled me to help with this panel is, I think as a queer adult, you can find resources, you can find people to support you. I didn't realize the gap. I recently had a friend tell me that they're working with their child and figuring things out, and they just felt all alone sometimes. And that feeling is something that nobody wants to feel, right? And a lot of times we tend to focus on the child, but it's a relationship. Parents are there to guide their children to becoming complete whole adults. And so we need to have both sides of the conversation represented so that we can, come out of this in a positive way. So we're kind of jump into some personal topics. So would you, if you're comfortable, tell me your experiences coming out to your parents, your family, or having your child come out to you. And again, I'll just kind of let whoever wants to go first start.
Well, I think Nathan and I have completely different stories on their coming out. We found out a few years ago. There was some, I guess, chat history, Nathan, that I discovered.
I didn't know how to clear web browser history. So that's kind of the catalyst that that sparked the conversation when I was like 14.
But then Nathan said, it's not what you think. And so Nathan thought that's when I found out, but I think I was probably just in denial and thought, okay, it's not what I think. And so really, I didn't find out until a year or so later when Nathan was on the computer and was actually doing something. What were you doing? Like,
Well, so it's funny because I was actually there was this website that I used to go on all the time called stardoll.com where you could just like dress up like with celebrities in different outfits. And for me, like having someone know that I was doing that was equally as shaming as looking at gay porn. And so there was like an incognito browser open and my mom's like, I know what you were looking at. And I was like, no, it's not what you think. And I was like, okay, this is what I was actually doing. And she's like, well, why would you be ashamed that you were dressing up celebrities? And I was like, well, you know. And she was like, no, I have no idea. And I was like, well, yeah, you do know, because I'm gay. And that's when she found out. But for over a year, I had thought that she always knew, but like we just never discussed it. So, which was honestly that was kind of my, like, I feel like she wanted to have the conversations and I never did. But I was like, you know, I'm not going to accept myself. Like that's off the table. I remember telling her if I, like, no one would choose to be gay. Like if I could, you know, wake up tomorrow and be a cis straight man, like I would choose that. And so I really avoided the conversation for years. And I told a few friends, like right after I graduated high school. But even then, like I didn't really have anybody who I was like actively talking to about this until I started seeing a therapist right before I went to college. And he was the first person to ever really fully affirm my identity and kind of create the space where I felt comfortable opening up to him. And you know, moving into the new dorms, you know, on the guy's floor, I had severe anxiety about, you know, what is my coming up process going to be like? Because, you know, I remember being 7 or 8 years old and telling myself, like, you are not going to tell anybody for the next 10 years. And you get, like, when you move to college, that is when you get to finally open up this chapter and figure out what that looks like. And so nearing that time where I was headed to college was the most terrifying thing. And so I remember my therapist telling me, you don't owe anybody your story. If you start lying about who you are or lying about details in order to avoid that truth, then that is a sign that you need to be honest with who you are. But aside from that, it's at your own pace, it's at your own time. And I think luckily I was able to find community in college where I was able to find a whole community of queer people in this conservative Christian college, and we kind of became our own resource to be able to share and breathe and deconstruct and unlearn and relearn things that we needed to.
Michelle, would you like to talk a little bit about that if you're comfortable?
Yeah, my story is so different from Kris and Nathan's, and I'm fascinated. I'm really enjoying what you're sharing. I kind of wrote down some things because I don't want to ramble. I've been asked this question a lot, and you know, what was it like for Noah to come out to you? Were you really surprised, etc.? And I j- I told Noah that I was going to say this, and she was like, "Mom, this sounds like that you talked me into being trans," and I didn't. But literally from 18 months old on, Noah was really, really in touch with his, at the time, feminine side, all things Barbies and skirts and dresses and and there was no middle ground. I mean, it wasn't like sometimes it was Hot Wheels. It was just, at McDonald's when they say, do you want the girl toy or the boy toy? I made it my mission to change the corporation and tell them to say, do you want a Hot Wheels or a Barbie? Turns out it didn't work, but I would always say, isn't it okay for a boy to have the Barbie? So we were still seeing Noah as a boy, like all through elementary school, etc. But she was just so feminine that I would say by like second grade, and when it wasn't going anywhere and I started doing my homework, I realized that trans was a possibility. Um, and I guess maybe by third or fourth grade, I don't want to say that I came out to her and told her what she was. Um, because I did not, I swear to you, I did not present it that way and said, oh, this is what mommy has done the research on, and this is what I've decided that you are. I just said, what I really did is how to talk with both my kids. I have a son that's older than Noah by a few years. And it was confusing for our whole family, obviously, to have a little brother that's into Care Bears and all that. And so we sat down with a great big poster board. I'll never forget it. We sat on my bed and I was like, kiddos, this is what I've learned. And I made a big column that said gender and a big column that said sexuality. And I said gender means if you feel like a boy or you feel like a girl. And this is before I didn't really understand the full spectrum of non-binary. So forgive me, Nathan, for being uneducated on that at the time. This is the early 2000s. And then I explained that sexuality is a totally different thing, who you like to maybe marry or have be your boyfriend or girlfriend or that kind of thing. So we went over it very clearly like that. And then I also made it clear that sometimes people are born in a body that just doesn't feel entirely right. And when they get older, like I made it clear to Noah always, because the research I saw said you can't transition until you're 18. So I'm thinking surgery in my head. What I came to learn later is transitioning means many kinds of things, many different things to many different people. And certainly she transitioned well before surgery 2 weeks ago. But that's kind of how she never came out to me. I didn't have that same experience of being surprised or finding something out, because she was absolutely always like she was. So I had a talk with the kids and just educated them on what I had learned about the difference between gender and sexuality. And they were like, okay, we're bored, and went on. And it was never a question thereafter. For Luke, my son, then it involved, friends coming over, etc. And I think one of the upcoming ones is, how do you handle other, telling other people, etc. And we didn't just go out and announce to the world Noah's different. It was pretty obvious when you met Noah that she was different. But we made it just a hard and fast rule from the beginning that kids couldn't play at our house that weren't okay with M&M posters on one side and Care Bear posters on the other side of Luke and Noah's room. It's just who she is, and there's no making fun, and we don't do that. Well, they wanted to play at our house and they wanted to play with Luke. So naturally, they just went along with it and said, Noah's little brother's different, but we're going to go with it. And nobody says anything ugly or they can't come back. That's how it went. And I think that kind of went on to parents, those kids' parents who may have asked, like, I saw Noah's little brother at school and I think he was wearing a girl shirt, etc. So that's our story. It's so different from Nathan's story. I love that we have such different stories, but Kris and I both love them just like two pieces. I love that everybody's story is different, but we can love all the way through it. From 18 months on, or from 18 years old on, we can love all the way through it. And so that's how that went for us. We did not have a coming out story from Noah to mom and dad. It was a little bit more of mom and dad to Noah.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I'm going to kind of skip around on the questions because I want to kind of circle to Hannah for some insight here. Hannah, why I approached you to be on this panel, and I said, I think that we can't have a conversation about this without including a mental health professional, because it is It's just such an important part to this. So can you share a little bit of your side of this equation, either as, you know, as you identifying in the LGBTQ spectrum, or how you help coach parents and children, or youth, I should say, through this?
Yeah. Well, I think what you have to think of when you think about kids and adolescents, especially, you know, just the normal everyday crap of being in middle school and high school, you know, social media and bullying and, you know, puberty and all that stuff. I mean, that's tough for any kid. Then when you add on top of, you know, sexuality or gender stuff going on where maybe your safety is at question. And that really can go with anything with kids in general, with violence in the home, drug use in the home, whatever. But, you know, adding that safety factor on top of just the normal in and out of being a kid and being an adolescent can be really overwhelming for kids. And that can be really tough. So I think, you know, for parents, if you're seeing that your kid's starting to struggle and you're not sure why, you know, see if they're open to getting some therapy. And doing some research on the therapist that you're wanting your kid to see. You know, in social work ethics, you're supposed to be open and affirming and welcoming to everybody, but that's not always the way it is. So doing, you know, some research and making sure that the kiddo is seeing somebody who's affirming to that person, using the name, the pronouns that they want to use, and that's who they are, really. It's not necessarily preferred name or preferred pronouns, but just who they are in general. So making sure the professional is affirming for that. And I think, you know, a conversation I always have with parents and with teenagers who are, you know, ready to have that conversation, you know, thinking when, you know, the kid or the youth or whoever has come out to the parents or caregivers, you know, let's say they're at, you know, a level 10 of their comfort level. You know, they're to a point where they're comfortable in themselves enough to share that with the world and with their caregivers. A parent might start at level 0. And some parents are always going to be non-affirming. And, you know, there are so many homeless youth that are queer and adults, you know, alike. But, you know, kids, I think it's hard with a maturity level, but to give parents or caregivers a little bit of grace with that and try to have conversations, and for parents to understand that they're not going to be perfect all the time either, but, you know, if they're coming from at least a loving place, an understanding place, a learning place, that's what the really important thing is. You know, for me, my older sister is gay, and so for me, coming out to my parents was really, really hard. I felt a lot of shame giving my parents 2 gay kids. And I didn't come out to my parents till I was in my early 20s, and love my parents. They are, you know, pretty progressive people. You know, we're always taught whoever you are is fine. But when it was their own kid, they did struggle with it. And I think that's sometimes hard for teens and people in general. You know, they see their parents have friends or, you know, gay colleagues, or, you know, talk about that stuff. But it can be really, really hard when it's your own child and your own family being affected with that. So again, I think just, you know, as long as everybody's coming from a loving, learning place, that's the most important thing. Obviously, with anything, safety is the most important factor. I've worked with plenty of kiddos that are not comfortable with their parents knowing anything about their identity in that aspect. And, you know, I have to keep that between myself and the kiddo, and hope that the parents can grow and kind of support them through that process when they're ready. But definitely safety has to be the priority with that.
And I think one thing I would like to share with this is obviously the parents that we have on this call are very accepting from day one, maybe having some, you know, maybe not like Hannah said, being at level 10, being always on the same level, but you know, it is important to know that when we have this conversation, this is not a shared experience among parents and youth. And one of the things that I've been hearing over and over again are these things like community resources, these terms, finding a sense of community, finding a community that I was comfortable in, having the resources available. So I would like, or having great resources, like Michelle was saying. So I'd like to kind of go one by one. And I know this is something that Hannah gave a caveat really early. She's like, I have way too many. We're going to have to email them. I can't ramble them off. But just one or two, when we get to Hannah, maybe you could pick the most important or something that you feel like, but one or two for Kris, Nathan, and Michelle that were invaluable to you. And so Nathan, do you want to start with this?
Yeah. I think for me, like, I think the biggest thing was just being able to just speak it out loud. That I feel like just having one person who is open to hearing your story was the most important resource for me. Because I think growing up queer, that you like I was my biggest bully in my head, that like I developed like this understanding of like that it was, you know, not safe to share. So I was the one who induced, you know, the self-shame. And so when you don't have the words and you're not able to speak it out, that is how, you know, shame just manifests. And so for me, it really was a turnaround when I started going to therapy. So like Hannah was saying, like finding a resource that is affirming, doing that research, and making sure that you are, you know, sometimes parents do not have the right words, and that's okay because it is a new experience. And so, you know, entrusting your children with someone who does have that knowledge and education to support the children.
And then Kris or Michelle, do you want to go next? And you guys can follow each other, and then Hannah afterwards.
Yeah. So I think I was coming at it from the Christian perspective of like, how does this fit into my beliefs? And I know that I believe it's not a sin, but how do I argue that with people who are like, no, it says 7 times in the Bible, you know? So I got this book called Torn, Rescuing the Gospel from the Gays versus Christian Debate, which to me was helpful. It was a man who, Justin Lee, who was Christian and figured out that he was gay, and then wrestled with all the scriptures. And so it kind of took, and so I gave that to a lot of my friends. I also gave it to Nathan and their friends, and that didn't go over that well, because I think by that time they were so frustrated by the church that I don't, but to me that was, and my friends, that was a good one, just a starter on, you know, how to kind of hold both of those things together.
Michelle?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that for anybody who has young children, you know, in kindergarten, when in preschool, even on preschool night, back to school night, every kid got a shape and a color. And I said to the teacher, does it have to be orange, or is there any chance maybe Noah could be a pink triangle? And she's like, absolutely, no problem. So really affirming, you know, in those early childhood years. Kindergarten, I said to the teacher, I see you have a dress up box. Noah's probably really going to want to, you know, dress up. Oh, that's okay. You know, kindergartners, they dress up as everything, firemen and princesses. And so that worked okay. By first grade, I noticed it wasn't going anywhere. The tendencies and the um, kids were starting to really segregate into like boy and girl groups. But Noah was always like with Maddie, was always swinging and holding hands with Maddie on the playground. And so I started, the internet was kind of newish. It was new to me. And I just kind of came across a website that I want parents of young children especially to know about. It's called mermaids.org. And it was a lifeline for me. I was scared to share my story. So I just did that thing where you like, you know, control it, and just look and read. And gosh, the stories were so much like my own child that then I became a member and started contributing. And it's through there that HBO found us, and we did the documentary in 2004. And I can't say enough about how in those formative years, I'm really not a part of it so much now. Our journey has just changed as she's gotten older, but gosh, from like first grade to like 7th or 8th grade, it was a lifeline for me. It's out of the UK, but lots and lots of Americans are a part of it. Canadians just I mean, trans is just everywhere. So that was the first place that I learned that blanket hair was not just something that my child made up. She had a receiving blanket that she wore. It was definitely yellow, so she could be a blonde, and made it into a ponytail. And it was just like an awakening for me to realize there were other parents out there. So mermaids is a great way to talk with other parents and families, and get those experiences relayed to you that kind of were like, oh, aha, I'm not by myself. That was a huge help when puberty started coming, and I was getting really nervous about, oh my gosh, things are going to happen here that I watched happen with my son. I happen to know she's going to get hair in places she doesn't want, etc. I decided to take it to the next level, and I can't say enough good about Children's Mercy Hospital that we have in Kansas City. Our doctor was Jill Jacobson. You can be there until age 21. She is the one that got us on hormone blockers, did all the testing to make sure that we weren't dealing with an intersex situation. I just learned so much from her from a medical standpoint. And, of course, she's super supportive. Noah loved her. It was so hard to leave there when Noah turned 21. And then we moved on. She trusted her judgment. She sent us to KU. And that's where we came under the care of Meredith Gray. So I just wanted to point out that those medical institutions are available in our Kansas City area. And we're so lucky to have that here, in the Midwest, because I felt really alone. A lot of the people on Mermaids I was talking to were in a much more progressive area of the UK or Switzerland or in New York or California. And here's me, in Little Liberty, Missouri, and so blessed, so fortunate to have that. A couple of just groups that we tried that I found more helpful probably than Noah did. PFLAG, probably everybody knows about, the parents group for gay, lesbian, transgender, binary, non-binary kids. Great group. Passages is in Kansas City. Again, it didn't really speak to Noah so much, but helped me a lot. And then I want to point out that there's a resource like right down by Westport area called the Like Me Lighthouse. And I don't like me, Like, Like Me Lighthouse. And started by a country singer that I can't think of her name, but she was like the first country singer to come out as gay, because that's not very prominent in that area. And she is from the Kansas City area, and again wanted to give back and make a safe place for youth. And so that's a really cool place and a resource to, I would encourage anyone to try to take their child and go and just try it out and see what works for you. I'm just going to go back to what I said before. Noah really never saw herself as trans. She was just like, I'm a girl mom. I don't know why you talk about this other stuff and me being a part of this other community or category. I'm just a girl. So can I go play now? Because I ain't got nothing for you on this. And so I would try to take her to those things so we could meet other people. And as I look back on it, I think it was for me as much as it was for her. I was doing it. Of course, I did want to help her and have her meet other people that were like her, because we knew no one. We knew no one that was like Noah. And so I thought maybe that would help. I don't know that, again, that it was super beneficial for her, but it sure helped me know that I wasn't alone. And I picked up some great ideas and just some good general support that said, hang in there, you're doing the right thing.
And I'll let you go. It's interesting because I feel like what I'm hearing from Nathan and Noah is we just wanted to say it out loud. We just wanted to be ourselves. And the parents are like, I read this book and I joined this group and I did this and I did that. So it's just it's an interesting parallel I'm seeing. So Hannah, would you like to share kind of your experiences on that and some resources for us?
Yeah. So Cheryl Wright is the country singer that started Like Me Like House. She basically came out and was exiled from the country music industry. So her story is really interesting. I think she's got a documentary out, so that's something to Google and check out. But in the Kansas City area, the Children's Mercy Gender Pathways Clinic, I've heard just awesome things about them. Transformations KC is a youth and caregiver support group. And then I know Truman Medical Center has an LGBTQ plus clinic specifically to serve the LGBTQ population. And I think the majority of the providers are also in that community as well. So again, finding, people who have that same lived experience can be really, really helpful for people. There's, for me, social media, Netflix, YouTube, Tumblr, when that was still a thing, it might still be a thing. Those were so helpful for me. And, I think there's tons of coming out stories on YouTube that, I always encourage kids and parents to just kind of go explore on there. A really specific book that was really great for me and I share with parents is called This is a Book for Parents of Gay Kids. That's the title of the book. And it's kind of like a chicken soup for the queer family soul, more or less. It's a bunch of personal anecdotes from, parents and the kids and different perspectives. And that's an awesome book to check out. It's a pretty easy read. But like Katie said, I've got a long list of different resources in our community, national resources, different TV shows that are really affirming and show different lived experiences, different movies and documentaries and stuff. So I'll shoot those over and then, chunk of those I'm assuming will be included in that follow-up email.
And one thing that I would like to point out that is a fascinating resource that I didn't know existed is in Kansas City, it's called Him, Her, Them Hair Studio. And so it's just a regular salon, but one of the things that they help is if someone is trans or gender non-conforming, just how do you do your hair? I kind of joke, I have really curly hair. It took me like 20 years to figure out how to do it. And so, and I always had this hair, right? So it's that's a resource that I just find is they have a fascinating mission. And then you can also go there if you just want your haircut, if you need a barber or a stylist. So, okay, so we'll switch gears out of resources and go back into another kind of difficult question. So I'll start with the parents and then, Nathan can chime in and follow up. How did you navigate having these conversations with your family, your community, and your friend groups? And Kris or Michelle, would you want to start us off? You're both on mute.
Okay, can you even see me because I'm just pushed something?
We can still see you.
Oh, I can't see any of you. So I'm trying to figure out how to go back.
What would 2021 be without some technical difficulties?
Right?
Let's see what I did.
You want me to go first, Kris?
Yeah.
You go first.
Okay. So one of the messages that I really want to send in this group is be proactive, not reactive. So like if I'm going to send Noah to a house for a play group, and I know that she's going to want to play dollhouse and Barbies and this and that, I would talk to the parents ahead of time and say, my words generally were, quote unquote, Noah's just always been really in touch with his feminine side. Because we used his back then. That's why I keep going back and forth. He's just very much in touch with his feminine side. And so not really sure what's up with that, but we super support it. And so for one thing, I wanted to make sure they didn't have a problem with it, because I was not going to have Noah be in a home where, no offense toward Christianity or your religion, or, I didn't want someone told Noah that his name would not be in the Lamb's Book of Life if he didn't stop being the way he was. So that one got past me. But I first wanted to make sure it was a safe environment for Noah. And also, I just was trying to educate, because they were probably thinking, what the heck is going on here with this kid? So I kind of used that verbiage. And then every single year, when school started, I would find out who the teacher was, go over that with her, kind of similar discussion. Also, school counselor is a great one to make sure they know what's going on, and always the principal and vice principal and the school nurse. So that was my job every single year, all the way through high school. I made sure that happened. I wanted to touch on what it's like to tell family. I didn't have to tell family very much, because Noah just always presented like that. As she began to present like that, and it was inappropriate, it wasn't cute anymore, it wasn't preschool or kindergarten, etc. I got some real backlash from my family, and probably my biggest regret is not standing up to them sooner. They're a Christian family. They're pretty staunch religious and take the Bible word for word, literally, and just thought it was a sin for me to even allow Noah to play with the dolls from The Wizard of Oz, which was her favorite movie. And so we started to live kind of, by the time she was in, say, third grade or so, living sort of a double life. And that, I wanted to share with you, is probably my biggest regret, because from third grade until 10th grade, Noah got to be herself at school, at all after school activities, at home. We were even in a church that was super affirming and accepting of Noah. She did a talent show where she did a Britney Spears dance that was, probably not even appropriate for church. I don't know. But then when we would go to family Christmas and birthdays and things like that, we would have to tell her, okay, remember, you're going to wear like your brother's sweatpants and then one of those t-shirts that doesn't have Care Bears on it, and things like that. So talking with family about it was a little different. We almost just flat out avoided it. And then one time I told one of my mom's family members something about it, and I really got in trouble, because she said, that's my family, I'll tell them what they need to know when they need to know it. And so I just couldn't win for losing, which I won't go into now. But by 10th grade, then, when Noah fully transitioned, remember how I was telling you that she really just didn't have a problem being called he, yet presenting as she. By 10th grade, I was like, Noah, the people at school don't even know how to relate to you. Substitute teachers misgender you all the time. And I just kind of want to know how you want to go into high school. That's when our high school started, was 10th grade. And so I didn't mean to push her, but it was just sort of like, practically, you pass so well, nobody's really following here. And so when we made that decision to go with female pronouns, absolutely not live the double life and be who she really was, then we were exiled from the family for 3 years. So I almost wish that I had done the exile if it was going to happen, if it was going to be 3 years from 3rd to 6th grade, because I put her through a lot of really uncomfortable moments with family that shouldn't have been on her. And I guess I was protecting myself and trying to keep the peace, and I regret that. So there you have it. That's how we told people, and that's how we told family.
Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that story. That's a tough story to share. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Michelle, you did so much well. I kept kind of looking over at Nathan's little, like, wow, you were on it. So we all have major regrets. I know it's hard to do it perfectly. When I found out about Nathan, it was the last day of school, I don't know, 8th grade, maybe. And we happened to be completely alone in the house and could just really process what had just come out. And Nathan's, I had said, Nathan, you've been holding this so close and hiding. We would come in and find like drawings under the couch because, again, Nathan knew that if we saw those in Nathan's mind, we would know that they were gay. And so, but like you, Michelle, from the time Nathan was little, we had 3 blonde-haired, blue-eyed sons, and they all looked very similar, and they were the Bennett boys. And I remember when Nathan was probably 1.5 or 2, the middle son, Landon, said, I know we're brothers and we have to have the same DNA because we look exactly alike, but like to say, I can't believe we're really brothers, because Nathan was just always so different. And so when I found out, Nathan, I said, I really would want you to go talk to someone, not because I think this is wrong, but just because you have been holding this secret for so long. And I am pretty sure you don't want to sit and talk to me about your sexuality. And at the time that was so, anyway, but Nathan said, I'll only go, I don't know if you remember this, Nathan, if you don't tell anyone. So I couldn't tell Nathan's dad. I couldn't tell my friends. I couldn't tell anyone. So for several months, I knew just by myself. And then in October, I got to tell their dad while we were on a trip away, only if when we returned, their dad didn't say anything to them. So those were the conditions. And then the brothers didn't know until Nathan was starting to enter senior year of high school. And finally, one of them said something just in passing. Now, everybody it's so funny. And then when I would tell my friends, I kind of would tell my friends with Nathan's permission, and everybody's reaction was all over the place. I would either present it like, well, you probably know Nathan's gay, and they'd be like, what? And be in total shock. Or I would build it all up to say it. And then they'd say, well, duh, we've known that forever. So it was, I just think, but everybody just loves Nathan. Nathan is very lovable. And so it was just even the very religious people, they, might struggle with, okay, is there a chance that you could, blah, blah, blah. But everybody just loves Nathan. So everybody kind of did their work, I feel, to some extent. I think what was harder was when Nathan was in college and came out as non-binary. And I think people can get gay. It's harder for people to get non-binary. That, I think we don't think about gender in general. I think we just quickly fall into our genders. If that's kind of a privilege we have. If it all matches up, we don't even, a lot of us think about it. And I think that really, that was really a harder thing for family to understand. And so Nathan had said, I think I'm going to start going by they, them pronouns. I'll probably start wearing skirts by the end of the year. And could you please do your homework? And then you can ask me questions if you have more questions, but I'd like you to do your homework. And so I kind of then disseminated what I was learning to family so that they also would kind of know what this meant.
May I ask, was your family willing to look at the information that you disseminated?
Yes, but it was really interesting. My mom, who's, a Christian, and she kind of has, and a difficult person in general, has kind of embraced Nathan. Wouldn't you say, Nathan, maybe easier than, my sister, who has no religious affiliation, and her family And she was like, well, they's plural and that just is confusing. And, it was almost like, really, you're going to die on this hill because you think they is only a plural, and I'd already sent articles about how we use they, like somebody left their sandwich in the refrigerator. That's not plural, but it's, so we do use they, them pronouns in ways that are not plural. So anyway, it was interesting, and Nathan can speak to this, the family members who were willing to do the work and really try and understand it, and those who weren't. I couldn't have picked out who was going to respond the way they did. And then on the Bennett side, so I'm Nathan's dad is Katie's dad's brother. And that side is very, I don't know how to describe that side. I really thought that side would have an even harder time. And many of them were just super good at just loving Nathan and accepting Nathan. So yeah, I don't know. You just never, it was not predictable.
I would like to share an aside from this other, side of things. My dad called me and said, well, I guess Nathan's non-binary. I don't really know what that means. And I go, oh, well, it probably just means that they're going to, I said, he's going to use they, them pronouns. And he goes, well, whatever it means, I guess he's just my nephew and I love him. And I go, well, they're your nephew. And he goes, I can't get used to that. I said, it'll take a little bit, but it was just really funny because, it was a really interesting comment that he was like, well, my dad was like, well, I don't know what it means, but he's my nephew and I'll love him. And I said, well, it was just so occasionally I will try to gently prompt him to, and it is difficult for family because I'd known my cousin Nathan in one capacity for my whole life. And so it was, from my end, it was a little bit hard not to mess up and to not try to, misgender them. But then I had still not yet come out to my family. And so then somebody earlier today on a call said that proximity to queerness is a weapon against bigotry. And I was like, thank you, Nathan, for paving this way for me, because now it's going to be easier because my family has been exposed to this before. So I don't know if I've ever shared that with Kris and Nathan before.
I don't know if you remember this, but when you guys came out to visit, we live in Seattle, and you had little Clinton and Lauren was with us, her younger sister, and Bob. This is, I think, before I even knew about Nathan, but certainly always had questions that could be a possibility. And we were talking about it, and Bob's like, I don't know what I would do if I had a child, that was gay. And I said, Bob, I said, really? I said, if Katie were gay, like you adore Katie, if Katie were gay, you wouldn't just love her? And you said, could we use my sister Lauren? Like, I already have a kid. She's on the softball team.
Because I was like, too close to home, back it up.
Okay,
you better say yes. Yeah. And that's interesting.
If I could, I just wanted to add to that one of my hints early on was we did the documentary for HBO in 2004. Noah was in second grade. And I said to my parents, who also disowned me at that time, but that was only a year that time. But I for doing the documentary, I said, even if you don't want to hear the stuff I have to say about it, maybe you could watch the documentary and it would be kind of enlightening. Also, I think on the front of Time magazine was a whole thing on gender. And I took that to my mom and said, I know you don't want to hear from me, but maybe if you read this. And she said, I don't need to see any of that. Science doesn't need to tell me what's right and wrong. And so I should have known way back then that probably wasn't going to help. I tried even one more thing, and I wanted to tell you guys about this resource for families who are really religious. There's a documentary, kind of old, like I have it on VHS, called For the Bible Tells Me So. And it's from the perspective of parents whose kids have come out and they're very religious families and how they coach with that. So I thought, wow, that's really up my parents' alley. That will really help. And they refuse to watch that as well. So they've never seen the documentary. They've never read anything that I know of, anything on trans, or educated themselves in any way. And when you're up against that, I mean, that's like a brick wall. I probably should have known right there that I wasn't going to get anywhere, but I tried for another 6 years.
So family is harder than community is what I'm hearing. So Mona, have we had any questions? I've got a couple of other kind of the last minute, or not last minute, but like wrap up questions. And I have one question that's been submitted by Madison, but is there any questions that have been submitted on your end?
There's a very long one that came through the questionnaire. Is that the one you're referring to, Katie?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you handle that.
Okay. And anything else?
Nothing else.
Okay. So I am going to read this question to you, and it's and whoever wants to field it can field it. And if no one wants to field it, then we'll hopefully follow up with this person. So it's talking about they're open-minded and accepting and supportive of others, making choices that ensure their personal happiness. So someone else's gender or sexual or gender identity is not an issue to me, the person issuing this question. As a parent of elementary students, I already teach acceptance of others' identity. My concern is this: the heavy public focus, individuals and group focusing so much on their gender and sexuality. For most people, I believe their gender is who they are. However, for others, it might be crying out for attention, opposition, trauma, for a result of trauma and mental health. In general, I feel humans are most accepted when they first accept themselves and therefore not feel the need to pressure others for their acceptance. Do you think that sometimes the advocacy has the opposite result of its goal? And so I think the paraphrasing of the question is, they're open. Do you ever feel that advocacy will cause people to maybe identify as they don't?
I'll just give this little story that might help this person kind of think about it a little differently. I'm married, I have a wife, I have 2 stepkids from her previous marriage. Every time I say my wife, I'm coming out. Every time I talk about my family, I'm coming out, whether that's to a coworker or a friend or anybody. And, you know, every time I have to think, is this a safe situation for me to do that? That's not a pressure that, you know, cis straight people have. So I think the advocacy, the education, the pride celebration, all that stuff, it's creating safety for the LGBTQ community. So I don't know, that might help that person kind of think about it a little differently.
I would echo that. And I think in 2 ways. First of all, I have the privilege of presenting as straight. I'm pansexual, and so, you know, I can present as straight and not have to tell people. I have a child, I'm in a long-term relationship with a man, I don't have to come out. And so I agree with Hannah. The second piece of that is, if you are living as a trans or non-binary person, and someone else probably has these statistics more down than I do, it is unsafe for you. No matter where you are, no matter the demographic, you are at risk, at higher risk than the average public. And so I think creating those safe spaces, I'll kind of echo what Hannah said. Sometimes I don't think people understand that, because we do seem so accepting as a society. We're having conversations like this. People are taking time to join in and then watch the recording. And I think we can forget that the first thing that Hannah said in this conversation was safety is the #1 concern. And there is still a safety concern for all LGBTQ people, but specifically trans or non-binary individuals. So does anyone else want to add to that, or I can go on to my next couple of questions that I wanted to make sure we touched?
I just wanted to speak on safety because, in 2004, we did the documentary. So what is that, 17 years ago? And the one thing the director says to me, what's the one thing that scares you the most? And it was his safety. I'm most scared that someone will hurt him for who he is. And so I think, I told you initially that we had tons and tons of support in our community, church community, school community, just friends, all that. I think a lot of that has to do with you make your community. And so we just always surrounded ourselves with people who were okay with it. Kind of like that story I told you about Luke not being able to have friends over that weren't okay with it. We just surrounded ourselves with people who were okay with it, and that to me made a safe space for Noah. So we could go to their house, and Luke could go play with their son, and Noah could go play with their daughter. So we just made it like that. And maybe we just got super lucky that in the 2000s we had people in our lives that. But I wanted to say also, what you were, gosh, I think maybe it was Hannah that said, it's really hard. Or no, it was Kris talking about how likable Nathan is. Noah, super likable, popular, everybody loved her, blah, 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 funny, all that. But it's really, really hard to say it, hate the trans community, and really like this person. And so I think so many people in our lives became a safe space for us because they had to reconcile that. They just had to reconcile it. They were just like, we love Noah. So of course no one here is going to hurt Noah. And as she got older and didn't want me to be with her at everything, like junior high football games, she had this safe space of all these friends who had supported her, like Maddie, and friends that she had grown up with, that literally I remember her going to her first football game without me. I'm scared to death that somebody's going to beat her up behind the bleachers. And she walked in the middle of a group of girls. They just literally surrounded her to keep her safe from anybody who might want to throw out something mean or ugly, etc. So I can't emphasize enough how much I've said we've had a lot of support, but safety is always paramount in my mind. So much so that the Liberty Public School District, when Noah was a homecoming queen candidate, had the Liberty Police Department with us, with our family on the field to keep us safe, because it had leaked to the media and we were concerned that we might have some crazies comings, i.e., Westboro Baptist Church, etc. And I was so concerned for her safety. And so that's the kind of, you just got to take those steps and just make sure that you're being safe. But I mean, that was the school's idea. They said, we're keeping this completely safe for you and your family. And that's it.
Perfect.
I want to add one more quick thing real quick. I think all the advocacy, education, all those sort of things, it's helping our society move from a tolerance place to an accepting and affirming place. We shouldn't have to tolerate someone else's existence. That, just saying, oh, I tolerate that person, that still has a really negative connotation. And all the hard work that everyone does for the LGBTQ community or the Black community, I mean, the list goes on and on. That is just moving the society to an affirming, accepting place instead of just a tolerating place.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's important to address that in our society, there's a need to label every single thing. And so even for myself, I found I still had a lot of anxiety when I was identifying as non-binary, and I needed everyone, when I first started using they, them pronouns, I needed everyone to see me and affirm me. And that caused in some ways the same anxieties that I had when I was in the closet, because it was the goal was affirmation from my community, from the outside, that I needed to prove something, that I can be palatable to people, that I can be consumable to the people around me as a queer person. I think that there is this, when you are the out group, that you are constantly aware of how comparing yourself to the in-group, that safety is inherent, that it's obvious. But for me, it's not even just physical safety, it's whether I just feel like a part of the community. And so I think these big shifts of educating children in elementary schools early, having these conversations, bringing that to the parents. I think part of that is saying that gender changes, sexuality changes, and that labels that we put on ourselves, those are going to change throughout time. And so it might seem like it's at a time where, we're having this conversation too much, but it's just because for the past however many centuries, because of colonization, the list goes on, that we haven't been able to have these conversations, and that gender variance and sexual variance has been like stripped from what we see as a part of our identity. So I think there is going to be this kind of pendulum time where you see more conversations happening, because people do need to have that language and be able to feel comfortable sharing their experience with their close community.
And Nathan, what is one thing that you wish you could tell your younger self?
Ooh. That's an interesting question, because, I think the main thing is that I just wish that I could just find one person to share that with. But that's hard, because when I look back at like who those people could have been, I really can't think of someone who I really, with the knowledge that I had, as a child, there was really no one that I would have comfortably talked to. And so I honestly think that something that is necessary for queer people who are deconstructing or unlearning their trauma or becoming familiar with their trauma is to just say to yourself, I'm so proud of the ways that you have survived. I think it is beautiful that, I had a therapist tell me this, that like you as a 7-year-old, you knew, you were aware of your environment, you took everything in, and you knew what you had to do to survive. And so I would say to be proud of that, and to be aware of what practices do you adopt in survival that serve their purpose then, that do not serve their purpose now. And so I think just to have grace with the inner child, and to just be proud of yourself.
I mean, I remember, Nathan, when I first found out, you said no one would pick this. And then a few years ago, we had another conversation, and you said, "Ugh, I'm so glad I am not a cis straight man," like that. And to know maybe then that you would be so glad of who you are, like that you eventually would get to the place where you not only could live with yourself, but you just embrace yourself. And quite frankly, our whole family, or at least I'll speak for myself, but I think our whole family would say, we are so much better for having Nathan in our family and offering that, just some diversity and we have just grown so much. And I was speaking to a group maybe 3 years ago, and I was meeting with Nathan ahead of time, and Nathan said, if you hadn't figured it out that one day, I don't know that I would still be out to you. And that was soul crushing, because I just thought that would be 8 years lost of growth that we would have just missed out on. And I can't imagine if you had stayed in the closet with our family. So I'm really glad I caught you dressing up those movie stars on the computer.
And one thing I would like to add to that too is I was talking with another one of our family members, and they said, who would have thought the Bennetts could be here? And because it has expanded the whole family's ability, right? Proximity to queerness. And so Michelle, my hope for you and your family is that the proximity to you and you and Noah maybe soften their hearts, right? It might not get you all the way, but
And I definitely did not want to end this without all of you knowing that I guess my family eventually decided it was more worth having their grandchild in their life and their child than and just dealing with it than not. They didn't want to discuss it much. They didn't want to have much to do with it, but they just gradually came to accept it more and more. It's been about 5.5 years, 5 years that we've been reconciled, and there wasn't some big reconciliation. It just like they just started to come around. Noah got some real accolades in high school, and I think that they kind of got to the place where they were like, what? She's best actress in the state of Missouri. We kind of want to be in on that. We're the grandparents. And they started to kind of come around, and that made it easier. Also seeing her in female costumes, I think helped them kind of get their head around it. But regardless, I just wanted to say that they've been, so supportive all the way through surgery. It's incredible now. She's almost like, grandma's favorite. And I know my sister's listening in here, and I don't mean to say that my daughter is the favorite, but I mean they have such a connection now. So I can't speak to what went on in my mom's heart and soul. I don't know if she educated herself. I don't know what went through there, because she's not comfortable telling me, but she did come around. And our family, and I think my sister would agree with this, is closer than we've ever been. And I think that a lot of that has to do with all that we went through with Noah. And then, yeah. So, and so just some other changes that have happened in our families that, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think they finally just decided these people, these humans that are mine, my own children and grandchildren, are more important to me than my beliefs and the way it rubs me the wrong way. And they've not only gone from being, like Hannah was talking about earlier, to just being tolerating Noah, they've just fully embraced and accepted her. So I wanted to make sure I got that in there, because I didn't want to leave everyone with the impression that didn't have a happy ending, because it really has.
And all these journeys have bumps in the road, is what I hear, right? And then people, if you can be more accepting of, you can't just decide to be more accepting of like a person. When you open your mind up and your heart up, it opens up for everyone around you, right? So we'll kind of end this, and I'll do one more check-in. Mona, any more questions? All right, so we'll end with one more question. What is one thing that you either want to tell of your story to allies on this call, or what is one call to action that you have for allies on this call?
I'm tired of my own voice, so I'm not going first, but I did write mine out, so it will be succinct.
Go
I can go
for
real
it.
quick.
Yeah, yep, you're gonna go, Hannah. Perfect.
Yeah, I can go real quick. I think for people that have young children, elementary age children, or work with kiddos kind of that age, it's just important to expose them kind of nonchalantly to, different types of people, whether it's, TV shows that have, a single mom, or, books about a kid being raised by grandparents, all sorts of people and families. And, nobody's born with hate in their heart. And so if we can just, kind of casually introduce kiddos to all sorts of people, then the world will be a much better place.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think with that, like, I think it's important to look at your own environment when you are like the caretaker of a queer child or a friend of one, that you have to be, I think, aware of what are the walls that you have placed within yourself that your child is probably mirroring or learning, that won't allow them to fully feel comfortable coming out with themselves. I think for me, like I noticed, as I grew older, that just like the gender roles that, I witnessed within my own family, within my own community, really just puts a lot of pressure on, how I'm supposed to perform and prove my worthiness to the people around me. And while that affects trans people, like, I think there's this idea that only trans people experience gender, or or experience the issues of like binary gender. But all of us do, all of us are affected by it. And I think it's important to recognize within yourself, you know, like what, you know, are there forms of misogyny or intolerance or other forms of like discriminatory or bias thinking that I have that my child would not feel comfortable sharing with me their identity.
That's profound. Pardon me.
I was just going to say, what a well-spoken family member you have, and what a great job you've done, Kris.
Well, yeah, Nathan, I'm not sure how much I had to do with it, but you know, Nathan and I were chatting yesterday, and Nathan kind of mentioned that, and I said, you know, I told you how much I loved Ellen DeGeneres. Like, I thought that was enough to like, I'm accepting, I love Ellen, but clearly I needed to do more than that. And, you know, there were signs there, and you know, we always did kind of question. And that is one of my kick myself moments for not just having a lot more conversations early on. And Nathan and I were talking about how, wow, it's so different now. I mean, I have a 1.5-year-old grandson, and just bought him a, you know, pride shirt the other day. And somebody else posted today their little baby in a, you know, rainbow hearts, you know, for pride. And I just thought none of that was even being discussed.
Right.
You know, Nathan is quite, you know, kind of right on that cutting edge of, I mean, they're just, everybody's kind of looking at it differently. Maybe speaking to that long question earlier, you know, are there just, is all this talk about LGBTQ and all these, you know, different things creating more people being lesbian or non-binary or whatever? And I really think this is my guess is people just didn't have words for it. Like, Nathan knew since they were 6 or 5 that they were different and that they liked boys somehow, or that but they didn't have the terms for it. And then the gender thing is a whole nother level of just not even having any vocabulary or understanding of like what it is that's going on that I'm feeling. And so I think with the awareness and with the, you know, there's a spectrum. You don't have to be all male or all female, you know, like that people, when they hear it, and I remember Nathan going on a date and using the terms we went to their, you know, rooftop or something. I'm like, who all was on this date? And that's the first I heard about it. And when I heard it, I said, Nathan, do you think you're non-binary? Because that totally described what I had been seeing in Nathan since Nathan was little. And I think, you know, now it's not that, oh, I'm just going to do this for attention. I think, I mean, I don't know if there's any of that, but I do think that people can hear these descriptions and be like, oh my gosh, that describes me. And so we're getting a lot more people. I mean, I know I have 60-year-old friends who I describe Nathan, and she's like, oh my gosh, that's me. I've had like 3 different people in my age group say, you're describing me. And so I just think we don't know the terms. And with that education, people are realizing maybe they fall in a different category than the narrow categories we had before.
And Kris, I would like to echo that experience with older individuals and talking about, you know, these conversations in them. There's like it's almost like they're like, oh, maybe that could be me. I'm like, I didn't mean to make you question your entire life structure here today. But, and then so Michelle, we've got 2 minutes left in the program. Do you have
Yeah,
your
I just wanted
parting
to
thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Kris, that's great, because I don't think we had the words for it. And Hannah, I was hoping maybe if we're not on your resource list, you would add middle sexes redefining he and she. That's our documentary that we did in 2004. And I don't think the word transgender is mentioned in the entire thing. I don't even think that that was the vernacular that we used at the time. My advice here is to let the child take the lead and then advocate and prepare the way for them to be successful. Noah would just kind of let me know what was important to her, like being Daphne for Halloween. And then I took the steps that made it safe and workable for her to do that. Try to anticipate situations. I kind of addressed that before, and address them before they happen, like communicate with the school as much as possible, or, Sunday school or wherever your child's going to be. Be proactive, not reactive. People will follow your lead, children and adults alike. One time Noah went to school and a little kid we came in late and the little kid on the circle said, Miss Adams, Noah has on girl buttons on her shirt. And she did. They were pearls in 3rd grade. And I said to the whole group, yeah, those kind of seem like girl buttons, but they're really just buttons. But he really likes them. So then he was like, okay. And then he turned around and everything was fine. And we found that adults will be kind of the same way. If you have the attitude going in that this is how it is, and we're really good with it. So like, if you're not, that kind of makes you the one with the problem. Please don't be afraid to honor your child's identity. Include them in activities, put them in stuff, and as an ally, what an ally could do would be to let my child come to an all-girl sleepover. Let my child come to a spa day because she identifies as female. Don't be afraid, because usually people are just afraid and then that makes them back off. And so sometimes she got left out of things that were really unfortunate. Maddie wasn't one of those people that left her out. So, and then never stop educating yourself, because the more you know.
Well, thank you, everyone. This has been a good conversation. I hope. I know usually what happens is in a week or so, I start getting some more feedback from the people that are on the call and people who are watching it. And the content was just really good. I mean, I think to sum it up, it's just kind of a bumpy road and there's no right or wrong. Not everyone has an accepting and affirming place. So as an ally, we can help be that place for youth. And if it's close to home, know that your journey is not going unnoticed, even when it feels like, you're carrying a boulder up the hill, I guess, right? That you will find your affirmation in life. So I don't know, my heart is full. Mona, do you have anything else to say as we wrap up?
Yeah, we're going to be on the call for another 90 minutes because this is such a great conversation. I don't want it to end. Y'all mind? Is that okay? I want to express the gratitude of Central Exchange to Kris and Nathan and Michelle and Hannah for showing up, for sharing. That's how we all learn. We're all on that continuum right now, and it's voices like yours that need to be shared even more. So I'm gonna go back on and reverse something I said at the beginning, that we were talking about the recording and how you could share it privately. This is such a great conversation. If anybody is opposed to it being shared publicly, please speak up now. Otherwise, on behalf of Central Exchange, I would love for you guys to be able to share this recording anywhere and everywhere, because the more we expose this conversation, the better off we're all going to be. So
I'm in.
Okay. I see lots of thumbs ups and smiles. That just makes me really happy. So again, you'll be getting that follow-up later on this afternoon from Madison. So the other thing is, we know that many of you may want to be a resource to the people that are going to see the video and everything else. If you do not want to be, shoot me a private message in the chat right now. Just say no, thank you. Otherwise, we would share your information. So if there's anybody that doesn't want to, I want to honor that. I don't see anybody reaching for their keyboard right now. That's a good thing. So, and again, thanks to Katie for facilitating the conversation, for getting these panels together. They're important conversations, and on behalf of Central Exchange, we want to keep moving the conversation forward. So I'm getting all choked up here, you guys. Thank you all very, very much, and be on the lookout for that email later on. And we'll see you on hopefully June 13th from 11:30 to 1 for the next conversation.
July.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
July. Thank you. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.